Today on GameWorks we talk about Life is Strange and how story and mechanics can get along in video games. There's long been a quasi-debate of sorts over story versus mechanics in video games. I say quasi-debate because there aren't exactly two opposing camps, more like two intermingling ones. No one is arguing the game should be entirely story-based because then that would just be a movie. And similarly, no one is arguing that every game needs to be entirely mechanics because that kind of destroys it as a medium to convey, you know, things. Ideas, themes, feelings, other stuff, you know, things. If you do know somebody arguing either of these sides this strongly, make sure to give them just a stiff smack in the face. Just right in the face. The argument is usually instead framed around simple preference. Do you like finding out things about the world of the game, or just shooting things and racking up points? Both points of views are valid, and at least in my opinion, there isn't much of a debate to be had. It's just personal preference. However, there can be a useful discussion on how to synthesize the two halves of video games. How can we combine the story and mechanics together effectively? All too commonly, these two sides of the games are thought of as separate. You have the story and the gameplay, and the two don't interact. Or if they do interact, it's often to the detriment of the game as a whole. This is where the term ludonarrative dissonance comes from. Mr. Big Words McSmartyPants over here. Please tell us, what does this mean? Well, okay. Alright. I will. It's when the story and mechanics of the game disagree thematically with each other. It was coined specifically in a review of BioShock. The story has themes poking holes in an Ayn Rand-style individualism. However, the argument goes that the core shooter game mechanics seem to imply an opposite mentality of extreme individualism for survival. There are some obvious holes in this idea, but it shows the way that narrative and mechanics could potentially work against each other. So in what ways can a story and mechanics be friends, and can we come up with a solid framework for the two working together? Well, let's find out by looking at the newly released game, Life is Strange. For those of you that haven't heard of it, Life is Strange is an episodic game published by Square Enix and developed by Don't Nod Entertainment, who previously developed Remember Me, a game that came out in 2013 to mixed reviews. A game that, ironically, not many people remember. Poorly named, guys. You really dropped the ball on that one. Life is Strange centers around a central character, Max Caulfield, as she enters into a new private high school as a senior. She discovers that she has the ability to reverse time a limited amount, giving her the chance to replay her conversations with people and change her responses or the events that happen. But not, and this is important, to change the long-term effects of her choices. Warning, there's lots of spoilers after this point, so skip to here if you want to skip the here. The here being spoilers. This story first presents us with a cast that seems cliched at best. Max, the shy, geeky outcast, Victoria, the rich bitch and her rich bitch groupies, Nathan, the crazy psycho rich boy, David, the overbearing abusive stepdad, Chloe, the punk druggy girl, Kate, the put-upon religious girl, Warren, the obvious science nerd. You could be forgiven for at first thinking yourself in a bad 90s teen drama where money is made of the dried out skins of small baby animals, because in this game universe apparently just having it makes you evil. As the story develops, however, we get to see these characters all begin to grow, and it becomes clear that their initial cliches were no accident. We, through the rewinding and replaying powers of Max, get to see the different sides of the characters, the different reactions that they have to Max depending on how she treats them. This is exemplified in the actions of the main bitchy rich girl, one of the two main antagonists in the game. In a scene where she's blocking Max from getting into a building, there are multiple ways to treat her when you use your powers to spill paint on her to get her to move out of the way. She seems actually sympathetically hurt if you get revenge by mocking her, and seems legitimately grateful if you're kind to her about it. Moments like this happen with nearly all the characters, and gradually turn them from flat stereotypes into mostly three-dimensional characters. One of my few issues with the game, however, is that there are certain moments that the main character doesn't quite react to things as I would, and that pulls me out of it a bit. Though I can't quite decide if that's just me being different from the main character, or the main character just not acting like a human sometimes. For example, there's a sequence where, to test out Max's powers, her friend Chloe tells her to guide her hand as she shoots a gun. Max simply re-reverses time every time Chloe misses until she gets it right, making it appear to Max's friend Chloe that she's getting the perfect shot every time. This is kinda weird, but it's totally within the realm of teenage superpower irresponsibility, so that makes sense. That is, until one shot ricochets and hits Chloe in the gut. This isn't really a problem, as Max just rewinds time, but Max then goes on to not say anything to Chloe about it. I don't know about you, but my reaction would probably go something like this. Yeah, maybe we should stop now. Why? Oh, yeah, why? Maybe because you just shot yourself in the fucking stomach and bled out before my eyes. Life is Strange so far, as only 3 of the 5 episodes of it have come out, have used its mechanics for complexity in storytelling. Now, I'd like to point out the difference between complexity and discovery. It would have been easy from a writing standpoint to just set up expectations for characters and then have Max uncover that actually in the end they weren't so bad after all. That's the easy road, but they don't take it. Instead, they do something that, while similar, is subtly but importantly different. Take, for example, the scene with Nathan Prescott, the douchey rich kid character who almost kills someone in episode 1 and is almost the cause of someone's death in episode 2. Max ends up confronting him in a diner in episode 3. As you talk with him in a ploy to manipulate a different character, it's revealed that his father is overly pressuring and maybe even abusive, but it's not presented in a way that implies that this is an excuse for the terrible things that he has up to this point done. Just an added depth to the character and an influence that sets him on the path that he's on now. It doesn't seek to take away the responsibility of the character for their actions, it only seeks to add depth. A similar thing is done with Chloe. She, in the moment, often acts overly sensitive and very self-centered. But, as is one of the main pillars of the story, her dad died 5 years previously, she has a bad relationship with her new stepdad, and she feels abandoned by Max's leaving several years previously. She's also devastated over the disappearance of her best friend Rachel. This causes a balancing act in the mind of the player, and presumably also in Max. Do Chloe's experiences give her the credence to be a little unbalanced, or is she crossing a line? And if so, where does that line lie? Through branching dialogue and the time reversal mechanic, the player and Max can discover where that line is. The time mechanic is used to do this for every character. You use this mechanic to realistically traverse complicated social situations, specifically complicated teenage social situations. The time mechanic is used to do this for every character, actually. It's no accident that at the beginning of the game, everyone's a stereotype. But even only 3/5 of the way through the story that is currently out, no one is still just what they appeared to be at the beginning. Chloe's a drugged-up punk rocker, sure, and she's racked with abandonment issues. Kate's an overly religious schoolgirl in the midst of depression of being drugged and possibly raped. David is an abusive stepfather and a vet with PTSD, racked with guilt about his inability to prevent Kate's suicide/suicide attempt, depending on how you play the game. Nathan is a crazy rich psycho boy and a kid with severe drug problems and probably an abusive father. Frank is a drug dealer and a guy who rescues dogs and loved Rachel Amber. Victoria is a manipulative bitch and she's afraid of social and academic rejection. Max is a nerdy hipster girl and has time-controlling superpowers. No one is exactly what they seem, and as I said before, none of the depths of these characters are used as an excuse for their actions, only as the complex causes of who they are, which then leads them to their actions. This is one of the main themes of the game, and it's both a mechanical and narrative theme, cause and effect, the unforeseen and unforeseeable consequences of past and future actions, brought to the forefront by the main character's ability to manipulate consequences, both for herself and other people in a limited time frame. In the end, here's the point. More games should figure out how to blend mechanics and story in this way. It's not like it would even be that hard to implement. The issue isn't one of difficulty, it's a problem of approach. All too often our games are made with the story development and mechanical development happening in two different spaces, sometimes literally two different rooms. But when keeping consistent theming in mind, it's not hard to figure out ways for game companies to achieve it. Even for something as common as shooters. Imagine something like Metro Last Light, where the currency is literally bullets. This conveys the idea of where the society of the game stands and also the concept of literally burning through your money to kill people. That's awesome, and already a great start to a really kick-ass narrative in a shooter. Story and mechanics in the game are inherently linked. The story is what happens in the game, and what happens in the game is tied to the mechanics. The link is already there, clearly there for anyone who looks. Developers just need to create their games with the ideas that their narrative presents in mind with the mechanics, or with the ideas the mechanic presents in mind for the narrative. See you guys next time. Troubling step from Nintendo. As the program is currently getting an enormous amount of submissions, you better believe other because their hype hasn't been hype. It's been like, hey, look at our game.
Yeah.
And we're like, wow, that looks cool. I'd like to have that.